everybody. Welcome to Sacred Sundays. I'm Ora Nadrich, and I am the author of Says Who and the creator of the Says Who method for transforming negative and fear-based thoughts. Sacred Sundays is a monthly salon. I know some of you have been here to our former Sacred Sundays, where we have thought leaders and influencers, and the intention of Sacred Sundays is to raise consciousness. And I bring in people that are doing really important consciousness-raising work in their respective fields. And I am very excited to have with me tonight Mallika Chopra. Welcome, Mallika.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Yes. And we're going to be talking about Mallika's wonderful book, which I've just finished, called Living with Intent. Actually, it's got a longer title than that, My Somewhat Messy Journey to Purpose, Peace, and Joy. So I look forward to speaking to Mallika about her book. And before we start, I always like to begin by bringing us into a meditation. So if we could join together for a meditation. Let's close our eyes. Find that comfortable place within yourself that is relaxing and welcoming yourself into the present moment of now. Taking a few deep breaths in, letting it go. And just noting your breath, not that you have to tell yourself how to breathe, you do just fine on your own, but simply to bring your awareness to the understanding that you're breathing in this moment and that you are here in this moment of now. And letting yourself feel your presence in your body, in your beingness in this moment, and what that feels like for you. To be here, not having to do anything, not having to be anywhere other than just here. And to welcome yourself, to invite yourself into this present moment. And to find that comfortable place that is solely your own. You don't have to bring anybody else into that moment other than yourself, what's most comfortable for you. And if your thoughts begin to wander, or you have a particular thought that just pops into your mind and has something to tell you, simply observe it. And if you want to focus on your breath as a way to remember the reminder of being present in this moment of now, finding that place within you that is your private place, your happy place, your serene place, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't even have to be called anything. It can just be the place that you like to go to sit. The place that you like to go to be quiet. And the place that you go to that is yours. Whatever that is for you. It doesn't have to be called anything. doesn't have to have an identity, doesn't have to have a meaning. It simply just is. And if you hear any sounds, observe them. If you have any sensations in your body, simply be aware of them without any interpretations or meanings or judgments or anything. You can let that all just go. Meditation is a wonderful time to gift ourselves with simply just being who we are. In our quiet, in feeling relaxed, in not feeling pulled in any other time other than this moment of now. And what now feels like for you. What does being in this moment feel like for you? Not for anybody else, just for you. In your time to just be. In your time to accept. Feel yourself in this moment with non-judgment and just acceptance of whatever this moment is for you. It's a time where you don't have to try. It's a time where you don't have to do. It's a time where you don't have to think. It's a time where you can do absolutely nothing. And what does nothing look like for you? What does it feel like for you? It can be whatever you want it to be. And if a thought comes up that wants to take you out of the moment that you're in right now, simply be aware of it. A thought has just come into my mind and it's telling me something that I can just observe and think of it as clouds moving in the sky. They never stay in the same place. They are always moving, as is our thoughts. Our thoughts don't hold on to us. We hold on to them. And we can let them go by simply observing them like you would watching a cloud moving in the sky. Hearing the music, maybe being aware of your breath, maybe the rising and the falling of your breathing, your chest moving up and down, or the warmth of your breath coming from your nostrils or out from your mouth. Simply observing, simply observing, and no need to do anything. Being aware of what it feels like to welcome stillness. Be aware of what it feels like to welcome time for you, just for you. Feeling the warmth of it, the comfort of it, the acceptance of it. And the relaxation of the breath, surrendering to the moment that you're in with total acceptance. Feeling your body relaxing more and more into your acceptance of this moment. Again, maybe feeling your chest rising and falling. Maybe the movement of your breath, feeling it in your belly. And the warm feeling of the breath. Relaxing more and more into yourself. Relaxing more and more into acceptance of non-doing. Just being you. Feeling your breath. You're breathing in this moment of now. There is no other moment other than the one that you are in right now. Feeling it, allowing it, accepting it. Ready, let your awareness go into moving yourself into transitioning out of the meditation, feeling yourself with an awareness of moving away from the meditation, but remembering this moment and this feeling of being present, not needing to move away from that, but simply bringing that awareness into whatever moment you move into next and all the moments after that. Take your time. There's no need to rush. Bring your awareness to your body, to being present in this room. And when you are ready, open your eyes. All right, we're going to begin.
Thank you.
So let me tell you a little bit about Mallika, who I've just met, and as I said, just read her wonderful book, Living with Intent. Mallika Chopra is a mom. That's a big deal, right? Is a mom. She's a media entrepreneur, published author, and a notable voice in the fields of parenting, meditation, and the power of intention. Her books, Living with Intent, My Somewhat Messy Journey to Purpose, Peace and Joy, 100 Promises to My Baby, and 100 Questions from My Child have been translated and sold in more than 20 countries. Mallika is the founder of Intent.com, an online destination for turning your intentions into tangible actions and inspiring others to do the same. Her intent is to harness the power of social media to connect people from around the world to improve their own lives, their communities, and the planet. You can visit internet.com to read Mallika's blogs, share your own intents, connect with others, and download the Intent app to incorporate intention into your daily life. As life is, the unexpected happens, and it can bring with it many, many things in our lives. It can bring us tremendous joy. It can bring us also sorrow. It can bring us heartbreak, and it can bring us devastation. And a week ago today, I lost my dear, beautiful sister, Esther. So I want to share with you that I'm grieving her presence with you tonight, but I'm also sharing her in my heart with you. And Esther was a very beautiful, special soul. And I think it's very interesting that I can be here with you tonight, which I was not quite sure that I could do, but I chose to be here with you and my special guest, Mallika. And what I want to say about intent is that so many things that happen in our lives shape our intent. We have intent, and Mallika will share more about that with us, about the beauty of intent and the importance of intent. And the intent that we have changes every day. And the intent that I have today has been deeply influenced by the passing of my sister. And the intent that I hold in my heart about Esther has influenced my intent in a whole new way. And what I feel about her passing is that she has actually added so much more to my intent. She has had me become aware that my intention moving onward will be even more about compassion. It will be even more about raising consciousness. It will be even more about caring for others. So that intention is something that we can choose to change at every given moment of our lives. So Mallika, I want to talk to you about that, about the power of intent. In my case, as I've just shared, it's with grieving, and it's actually heightened my intention. And I know you've dealt with that, and you talk about it even in your book. I recall something that you wrote about with I think it was was it a family member or a couple, where the wife was experiencing a health situation. It was breast cancer.
Yeah.
And that an incident that happens in our lives changes everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we can find it affecting not only what our present intentions are, but suddenly our intentions are changed unlike anything that we've experienced before. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So, first of all, I'm honored to be here, and sorry to hear about your sister. And I think
you.
it's so graceful and humbling to be in your presence, especially with that. And I hear, though, how the intentions for compassion, for healing, are bubbling up even more. So there's a phrase in the Upanishads, which says, which is one of our great Indian texts, which says, "You are what your deepest desire is. As is your desire, so is your intent. As is your intent, so is your will, what you're willing to do. As is your will, so is your deed. As is your deed, so is your destiny." And so it begins with going deep inside and really knowing what you want and how you want to serve. So I grew up in a family where I learned how to meditate when I was 9. Almost everyone is familiar with my father, Deepak Chopra. And so he taught us how to meditate, but as importantly, he had us think about our intentions from very young ages. So there is a phrase in the Course of Miracles that says, "I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience and set the goals I will achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked." And my dad would ask us after our meditations, "What do you ask for?" So as kids, we'd ask for tickets to the Celtics, a trip to Hawaii, new toys. And then he would ask us, "Okay, we'll work on that, but what about love, compassion, a sense of purpose?" And so for me, intention really is thinking about what our deepest desires are, thinking about how can I serve, and really intents come from the soul. And that's what I hear when you were speaking earlier, that really what you've obviously done in your life, but what the calling that's coming from this passing as well, is really from a soulful level. It's not a goal. It's not something that we're just trying to achieve.
Right, exactly. And we have relationships to our intent in that, I'm experiencing now on the side of death, in the side of a dear beloved passing. So every day we live between these two states. We live between being in the living and what is it that we desire in life. And sometimes on the other side of that is what I'm expressing with what I'm feeling with my sister. That delicate balance of how we live our lives with intention, and that you described with a young desire, which is oftentimes for pleasure, or we seek out the external pleasures, cultivating that balance of where it's something deep within us and in service, being in service, which is something that resonates deeply to me very much just in my life in general. But again, with losing a loved one, all of these things become heightened for us. So can you share with us about, I know you talk about, and I just want to say that in your book, I very much really enjoyed how honest you were about your own understandings of your intentions.
Yeah.
And keeping it very real, and that we are full of contradictions, and sometimes our intentions, our intents can be more surface, sometimes they're deeper, and they go deeper within our heart and soul, and sometimes we go on a more surface level with them. So if you could talk a little bit about the balance of that.
Yeah, so I will say that growing up and watching what my father did, often the people that came to my father had gone through some sort of trauma. So they were going through a divorce, someone that they loved had died, they had been diagnosed with a disease. And so in those days, and again, he's been doing this 30, 40 years, people weren't meditating. You didn't have amazing places like we are right now at the Mystic Journey Gallery, which is amazing, where people come and meditate, and yoga studios on every corner. When he was doing this, he was the witch doctor who was selling snake oil. But what we saw is that people came often because there was a life event that shook up their everyday reality. And that life event started to really stir questions of who am I, what do I want, how can I serve myself, how can I serve community? And it was really those events that often made people question their lives and start a search for meaning and purpose. So that's kind of what my brother and I got to observe growing up. To be honest, it really had nothing to do with me and my brother. We were normal kids who grew up in Boston, went to great schools, wanted to travel, go to games, do all kinds of things. And so for me, this was kind of like my dad's world and, this new age world that we kind of made fun of, to be honest. But what happened for me is life continues, and the subtitle of my book is My Somewhat Messy Journey to Purpose, Peace, and Joy. And so in it, I tell a few stories, but the first kind of turning point for me was when I was in my young 20s. I had graduated from college, and I got my dream job, which was basically to launch MTV in India. So it was as far from the world of my dad as possible. And I went to Bombay and Delhi, and I traveled all over the world doing concerts, partying. I met my husband at a rave in New Delhi. And so that really was, I was having the time of my life. But what happened?
Did you say that in your book?
Yeah.
You bet at a rave?
Yeah, I think I say it. But yeah, I did. I was the first ever rave in New Delhi. So life was great. And again, I think, in life, we have moments where things are really working out, we're feeling successful, we're happy, our relationships are great. And there was a particular day at MTV, which was really, it was my dream job. I had just done like a video for No Doubt in the streets of Bombay. I had our staff from all over. I was 23 and had this amazing opportunity to launch the channel in a new country. And we were driving in the streets of Bombay. I had people from Singapore and London with me, and we had just sold a big sponsorship package for the channel. And we were driving through Bombay, which is, even 20 years ago, a very crowded city with a lot of poverty. And those days you had to drive through the slums, and there was always a lot of traffic. Now they have these flyovers, so you don't even see it anymore. But in those days, we had to drive through the slums. And we found ourselves, we got stuck in traffic. And so we were in a car, drinking champagne because we had just had sold a big deal. And just our car was not moving. And so as we inched along in this traffic jam, it took about an hour to see what was causing the commotion. And we saw that there was a group of children. They were probably between 8 to 15 years old. They were the poorest of the poor kids, in tattered clothes, shoeless. You could see the malnutrition in their stomach. And they were all in the road, blocking the road, mesmerized by a shack, a roadside stall on the side of the road. And as we inched along, we saw that in this shack, there was a television hanging by wires. And on the television were kids grinding to hip-hop music on the beach here in Santa Monica. And there was our MTV logo. And I remember everyone in my car began to cheer because this was a huge success. We, had sold our first sponsorship, but also MTV had really reached every corner of the planet. And as everyone in my car cheered, my heart stopped. And I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I doing? I had grown up in an environment where my dad forced my brother and I to meditate, ask all these questions. And again, we didn't really kind of consciously think about it, but I think there are certain moments in life where you kind of stop and you think, is this what I'm meant to be doing? And even though I had the dream job and the dream opportunities, I realized this is not the way that I'm meant to serve, that I'm living my intention. What is my intention? What are the deepest desires of how I can give back? And so for me, that was really one of the first turning points in my life. And we can talk more because I've had many. But that really was the first insight into, okay, what does it mean to live a life that is aligned with your deeper purpose?
Right, and something felt inauthentic to you in that moment.
It felt inauthentic.
When you say your heart stopped, we get these signs sometimes where something doesn't feel right to the core of our being. Yeah. And many times we might not pay attention to that. Do you know? I think many people live their lives feeling that and then pushing it away. And sometimes it can take many, many years of living the inauthentic life until people can, maybe like those that came to your father, that have dis-ease, that their life is no longer working. And we hope that we don't have to wait till that moment. You were actually very fortunate because you had it relatively young. Your first, you could call it your first aha moment.
Yes, so first aha moment, but I think that's why the subtitle of my somewhat messy journey is very important, because you have moments and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not doing that. So then you kind of make adjustments. And for me, it was kind of going back to grad school. We got married, had kids, and I have many different experiences, but I'll just jump to kind of this one, which was, I was speaking, I started teaching and writing and speaking to audiences. And I remember speaking to an audience about the benefits of meditation and mindfulness and being anchored and living a healthy life. And I was on stage telling this to all these people, having this conversation with them, but I was actually thinking about other things. So I was having a parallel conversation in my head, which said, why did I have that chocolate chip cookie and double macchiato before getting on stage? I have to go get the dry cleaning, turn in my daughter's permission slip, and I forgot to send that note to my investor. And I realized that I was being totally inauthentic, a total hypocrite, and speaking about one thing, but really not living that kind of life. So again, that was another turning point to say, you would never be able to tell from the outside that I was stressed and couldn't keep it together and, just barely getting through the days. But it hit me, again, not to the point where it was a crisis moment, but leading up to something. And so, again, taking another aha moment. Right,
and having those aha moments, and then what do we do with our aha moments? We get these, sometimes these, in my class last week, I teach a class here called The Journey Within. I said, everything we experience, everything we encounter, every person we encounter can be an opportunity for a mini awakening. Doesn't have to be always this huge epiphany or gestalt. We can have these mini little moments of awakenings, which are blessings and they're gifts. So this is, would you say, was this your second big aha moment?
Well, I've had several, which I write about, but yeah, it was, it wasn't so dramatic. And I think that's one of the lessons that I've learned in my life is I've seen a lot of people who came because it was dramatic.
Right.
A loss.
Yes.
A diagnosis, a separation. And hopefully what we've seen in the last few decades with more mindfulness exercises, more self-awareness, more movement-based, kind of being in touch with our bodies, hopefully people are getting more in touch with sensing these things earlier on. Right. And so I think that's one of what I was trying to do in this book and just my talks is, people assume that because I'm Deepak Chopra's daughter, that, I do yoga, I'm vegan, we lead a certain kind of life. And I kind of wanted to tell people, look, I can't even do downward dog. Like I'm the most irregular meditator on the planet. I learned when I was 9 and I'm 46 now. And so I've gone through years where I do it twice a day for like an hour each time to like years, maybe a decade of not meditating at all to starting again. And so, I also go on and off. I'm not vegetarian. I had ice cream on my way here.
Which I have to just say is really, it's very disarming. It's very honest. It's so forthcoming, your honesty. And it's not like you just spill your guts and then, okay, I got that out of the way. It's throughout your book So you continue to really share that those struggles are real, obviously, for all of us. Nobody has a corner on this. I don't care whether you are, as you said, being the daughter of a...
And nobody knows the real story about my dad, so that's also
That's
true.
for part 2 sometime in the future. Stay tuned. But no, Mallika, it's true. It's like we do struggle. We struggle with being able to find our way with understanding whether we're living our authentic selves and learning. And you share a lot of your inner thoughts, having written a book on the things we tell ourselves and how to transform them into positive, useful, constructive thoughts. Is again, it's the discipline. It's what we need to learn so that we can be clear about what our intents are.
Yeah. So what I found for me, what worked, and I spent time really thinking about that, is what I describe in the book as the path to intent. So what does it really mean on a daily basis to live these practices? So we can all, meditation is a great tool, but what are the other aspects of it? So in the book, I outline a path, which is around INTENT. So an acronym, which is an easy way to remember these things. So I is for incubate. And incubate is kind of what we did when we began the session, which is really finding quiet time, getting in touch with ourselves, honoring that silence, that stillness. I use the word incubate because it reminded me of when we're pregnant.
Right.
It takes 9 months to nurture a child.
Yes.
It's not like we just have an intention or an idea. Like it builds with time. It's like planting a seed. So I is for incubate, which is really honoring the space and the time, because a lot of people I've seen, through my website and through my work, is they don't know what they want. They don't know what their intentions are. They don't even know anymore what their deepest desires are. So it takes time. And so we need to honor that time. We need to honor that space. So I is incubate. N is for notice. And notice is kind of what you had just mentioned before. Noticing the people, the places, the circumstances that we find ourselves in every day. And every day we find small opportunities, small miracles, small connections. Often we're so focused on our end goal, we don't even notice the person who's sitting next to us who may be part of this incredible journey that we're about to embark on.
Right.
T is for trust, which is trusting our intuition, trusting that other people are there to support us, trusting that the universe is there to help us as well. E is for express, which is actually at some point stating what you want, taking ownership. I have a whole website, a whole social media platform where people are stating their intents and getting support. So you don't have to post it on a social media website, but say it to yourself. Take ownership of what you want, what your intentions are. The next N is for nurture, which is nurturing relationships, taking care of ourselves, asking for support, supporting others. And then the final T is for take action, which is very important because I grew up in a self-help industry where I was often so frustrated where people would just say, oh, just ask what you want and the universe will take care of the details. I do believe that, but I believe that you also have to take action, and there is a time for SMART goals and taking the steps and ownership to really embrace what you want in your life.
Right. I think also, as a meditation teacher myself, I find that many people say to me, I don't have time. That's that classic saying, I just don't have time. Well, what does that really mean? Time to honor the self, and yet we'll honor the self in so many other ways without honoring the deepest part of the self, which is going within.
Yeah.
And being in that meditation. So, especially now with all of the busyness and all of the things of our lives, it's even that much more needed than ever before. And I know with you, Mallika, also teaching meditation, 10 minutes, I feel like it's like plucking a chicken. I learned Transcendental meditation, 20 minutes twice a day. Now it's, can you do it for 10 minutes? Can you do it for 5 minutes? Can you do it at a red light? there, you just did it.
Yeah.
Do you know? It's like it's just going by so fast. So how much more do we need to really convince ourselves of that self-care and that self-love, that living with intent really becomes a priority?
So I grew up doing TM too, and got to doing all the advanced techniques and etc. And to be honest, in my 20s and 30s, 20s I couldn't care less. 30s I started, incorporating meditation back into my life. And, as a mom with 2 kids, with a business, running around, taking care of everyone, I can't find 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. And I always tell Roger Gabriel, who runs the meditation programs at the Chopra Center, like, I'm so sorry, but I really can't do it. That does stress me out. What I've found, though, is if I can find 15 to 20 minutes for me once a day, that fits into kind of my schedule and routine. That's not the 2-minute, just take a few deep breaths, but like 20 minutes where I really can find time to anchor myself. That's great. And I don't feel guilty if I haven't done it, but I feel good if I have. And what I find is when then I'm doing it regularly, I start yearning it more and more. And I then start kind of saying, maybe I'll do a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening. But I don't approach the meditation as something that I should feel guilty about or...
No, I think that's counterproductive, and I think it's counterintuitive, and then it goes all into sort of the judgment,
yes.
which is really antithetical to the acceptance of that I can do what I can do.
That being said, I think what you did say is also important, which is we live in a society and a world today where we want fast fixes.
Right.
And we can't substitute what the benefits of being connected to spirit have.
Absolutely.
And so it may be through your meditation practice, through your yoga practice, through walks, find what you can to honor that space.
Absolutely, and it can be very personal to you. It doesn't have to be what anybody else is doing. I think oftentimes there is that pressure. I mean, I think you even mentioned some of that in your book, that we feel that we have to keep up and that we have to compare and that we have to meditate perfectly and all of these self-imposed expectations that we have on ourselves. But all the while really do finding time and again honoring the self so that we give ourselves enough time where it's not just the quick fix.
Yes.
Because you really can get caught up in the quick fix and then that becomes your meditation.
Well, and I think it's the quick fix in everything. I mean, I talk a lot about my sugar addiction in the book, and which obviously continues.
Can we just take a moment that she had ice cream on the way over here? Okay.
It's so hot.
I think that's actually wonderful. What flavor?
I had the chocolate fudge brownie from Ben & Jerry's. But
okay, come on, Mallika, that's pretty cool because God knows we beat ourselves up for so many things. Do we have to beat ourselves up for these little pleasures? And you talk about it in the book.
I think it's finding balance. And so, after I had that moment on stage where I kind of realized, oh my God, I'm talking about one thing, but I'm kind of a mess inside. I made a decision that I was really going to change my life. And it wasn't dramatic changes, but it was really thinking about what does balance mean for me? This word balance, seems so ephemeral. And so I really on stage set an intention that I'm going to figure this out. And so the first thing that I did was I actually was in La Jolla, where my parents live, and we had gone for a weekend. And it was, evening time. My mom was cooking dinner. My girls were watching a movie. My husband had gone for a jog, and my dad was sitting on his computer on Twitter. And I decided, maybe I should talk to my dad and tell him what's going on. So one of the key things in our family life is nobody talks to my dad about their issues. The rest of the world talks to my dad about their issues, but we obviously talk to my mom about everything. So it's kind of unusual for me to approach my dad to really ask him. He always thinks everything's great and fine. So I sat with my dad and I said, Papa, I want to talk to you. And he was mid-tweet, and I said, I'm really stressed out.
Mid-tweet.
Yes, and so I could see my dad like typing and looking at me and wondering what's going on, and then suddenly he realized that I was not happy or I was stressed, and so he starts looking for my mom to come and deal with me. And so I saw this like panicked dad expression, and I was like, no, Papa, it's okay. Nothing's majorly wrong, but I'm feeling out of balance. And I literally watched my dad like take a deep breath and go from panicked father mode to Deepak Chopra mode. And then we sat together, and that's really one of the first exercises in my book. What I try to do generally is to make things practical. And I think this first exercise that I did with my father was very practical. I realized that I was totally overwhelmed and stressed out, but I didn't even know why. And so what we did is we looked at the work of Dr. Dan Siegel, who's here in Brentwood, and an amazing writer and thinker and doctor. And he talks about the healthy mind-body platter and what are the different aspects of, what we need in our life for healthy brain connection and growth. And so we looked at his brain platter, and off of that created a balance wheel, which is in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's really quite simple. What we did is we said, okay, look at sleep. Am I sleeping enough, and do I feel rested? Look at food and diet. Obviously, I have a sugar thing. And, looking at that, looking at, do I enjoy what I do every day? Am I enjoying my work? Do I feel socially connected? Am I, meeting friends? Am I laughing enough? Do I feel intellectually stimulated? Am I feeling spiritually connected? But this balance wheel that we came up with in the book is very practical. Like, it's literally you put in numbers and you figure out. And what I realized is that, despite all my sugar issues, I was doing okay on like the food and the health, but where I was really lacking was having fun, having intellectual stimulation, the spiritual connection, because my entire life I have meditated and I was too busy with 2 kids running around and everything that we had to do to meditate anymore. But I had enough time to spend like an hour on Facebook looking at what everybody else was doing in the world.
Right.
We just have to kind of start doing some shifts.
Right.
And so that was really the first step in my journey, which was, let me take a step back and first figure out where I am, and then what are small things I can do, not drastic changes, but small things that I can do to really start finding more balance in that wheel.
Mm-hmm. And I think that oftentimes we feel the lacking of the very things we need the most.
Yes.
So then we're on the other side of it. And that's, of course, when you said to your father, I feel stressed. And so I think, again, the checking with ourselves, checking in with ourselves. How do we take our own personal inventory? Whether it's through meditation, whether it's from mindful eating, whether it's whatever disciplines that we allow ourselves to adhere to that are basically healthy and taking care of ourselves. I think it's important to check in. Yes. It's really important, and not just in meditation, not just when we sit for however many minutes we sit. I think the idea of, how am I doing? How am I feeling? You can be talking to someone and you can say lovingly, because we hear an irritation in their voice, or they may say to us, I'm hearing something in your voice. Are you okay? Mm-hmm. Not to have to wait till we have to ask that of each other, but begin to learn how to ask that of ourselves. How am I doing? How am I feeling? It's like taking a spiritual pulse, if you will.
So one of my favorite experiences that I had while writing my book was, it's the nurture chapter. But in my family, we take turns going to India to see my grandparents because they were getting older and everyone's abroad. And so it was my turn to go to India. And, I've had 2 kids. Life was so crazy. So finally I told my mom, let me go to India to be with my grandparents because they were getting older. And so my mom came and took care of my girls, and I went to India. And I remember sitting on the plane. First of all, it was like going on a vacation because it was the first time I was by myself on a plane going to India. It was heaven. But thinking, oh, look, what a great granddaughter I am, going to take care of my grandparents. And I remember getting to Delhi, going home, and going to bed. And so when I went to bed, I was sleeping in a room and the fan was on. And I woke up a little while later and the fan was off and the air conditioning was on. The next time I woke up, there was a blanket on me. Then the air conditioning was off. Then there was a glass of water next to me. So all night long, my grandmother had been coming every half hour to make sure I was okay and making sure, adjusting whatever she felt hot. She'd put the air conditioning off, and so. And then I woke up in the morning and my grandfather came in with tea and a newspaper, and we sat outside, and then we went for a walk to the park, and the average age at the park was 85, and everybody was like, oh, that's Rita's daughter, and this whole community knew who I was, etc. And I remember feeling oh my God, I'm 40 years old, and no one takes care of me anymore. I went to India, and for 1 week, my grandparents just took care of me. And it was such an incredible, nurturing feeling to realize, we all need care. We don't all have grandparents and this amazing gift that my grandparents gave to me, but it was such a wake-up call that I can't take care of other people if I'm just suffering and exhausted and frustrated all the time. I need the time for self-care too.
Right, it's replenishing the well, and especially as women. That's something that we really need to do, is because as women, as nurturers, and as mothers, and even as sisters, we give, and if the well is empty, we are not good for anyone, really. Now I'm going to open up the room for some questions. If anybody has any questions for either Mallika or myself, please jump in. Okay, yeah. I'm going to repeat the question because we're filming, just so that you all know that. And Jeff's question is, how do you find your desire? You had a transition in your life and you realized that what you were doing was not what you want to be doing. Is that correct? Now, not everybody knows that about themselves. So how do you find your deepest desire?
So it's a multi-layered question. I'm going to start off by more as a parent, what I'm seeing with children, which is very different from where you ended up. But as a parent, what I'm seeing is that we live in a society, I think we always have lived in a society where, we want our kids to do well in school, they have sports, there are just so many accomplishments that, especially today, I feel it's go, 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 without taking time to ask, are you happy? Are you enjoying what you're doing? And I really find that with my kids right now and their friends, is that, there's so many activities, there's so many classes that they have to take, there's so many social media demands that there isn't time to just be quiet. So first of all, as a parent, I yearn for giving our children space for just being bored, for wandering, for not knowing, and for becoming more comfortable with the idea of not knowing. So that's more as a parent. But that being said, so many of us, myself included, I grew up in Boston. I went to private schools there. I went to an Ivy League school. I went and did my MBA at Kellogg. Even now I'm at Columbia, doing a master's in psychology. And so, I feel like I'm on this accomplishment rat race still. And I've had great jobs, but I think what happens for me personally, and I can only talk about that really, is that there are moments where it just doesn't feel right. So I think first is, and that's why meditation and these techniques are so powerful, because they help us just pause. We're so busy most of the time, we don't even have the time to think, am I happy? When we pause, I think first we can physically feel, am I in disease? Maybe through your stomach you're not feeling well, or body aches, or when you're physically not right, that's a hint that, I'm not happy. So I think first is kind of taking pauses and asking yourself, at different points in my life, because when I was 20 was different than when I was 30, which is different than I was 40, what I wanted. So I mentioned earlier that my dad used to make us ask, what do I want? And it would come down to happiness, connection, inspiration, a sense of purpose. So first it's asking, what do I want? And then I think it's paying attention to the things in your life that give you a sense of meaning and purpose and happiness. So one of the exercises that I did in my book is a mind map, where I really just ask, what makes me happy? And I realized that I hadn't asked myself that in a long time. Like when I was in college, I kind of knew what made me happy. And then in my 30s, I had my kids and, that made me happy. But I had reached a point where I didn't really know anymore what made me happy. And so just the process of thinking, what makes me happy? Great books and literature make me happy. Poetry, that was something when I was young, nurtured my soul. But again, like I mentioned before, I spend time on Facebook and I'm so busy doing my work and whatever. I hadn't read a novel or a poem in 5 years because I didn't have time. I love good food. I love to travel. So first for me, it was writing really thinking about what makes me happy. And then really the exercises that I've kind of developed, through this process was then starting to connect them and then actually doing things about them. So I said, take action. So for me, I said, great literature, being connected to friends. I started a book club. It's really not rocket science. I just meet my friends every 6 weeks. None of us have ever read the book that we were supposed to read the book, but we get together and we pretend that we read the book and we have so much fun and we laugh. And, it's something I was realizing, I didn't have joy in my life anymore. And so that, a small thing brought so much joy in my life. So I think we can do small things. I think when it comes to career, and relationship choices and things like that, those are bigger leaps. And so I also believe that you can find, because not everybody can do really what they want to do. There's some real people have some barriers, but I think you can find ways every day to bring a little bit more purpose and joy and meaning. And I think it's really about noticing, noticing the people, noticing the circumstances, noticing the every little day things, oh, I just met this person in the elevator, or I thought about that person and they called, and why did that happen? So those are some of the things that have worked for me.
I also want to add to that, I agree with you. There are some people that will say, oh, but I can't change my job. It's easy to say that. I can't. I have to work on a job that I don't like. I have to be in a relationship that I'm not happy in. The have-tos and the shoulds. And I think one thing about childhood that I think is so valuable to go back and to remember, that sometimes it's the simplest things that make us happy.
Yes.
That doesn't cost anything. That doesn't require us to go wide and far out of our comfort zones or where we live. There are things that if we just paid attention to some of the things that made us happy. I think of how much I loved to literally do cartwheels when I was a little girl. I said I did cartwheels more than I walked.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to be doing cartwheels now, although maybe, I don't know. But you know what I mean? There are things that we can do that we go, wow, I remember rolling down the grass on a hillside and then looking up at the clouds, things that oftentimes people will say, oh, I can't do that. No, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. Be aware of the resistances. Be aware of the no's that we tell ourselves. Sometimes we'll just say, oh, no, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. And then if you allow yourself to be open and receptive and expansive, suddenly you'll find yourself feeling more abundant, and that the choices that you reach out for are very satisfying.
I have seen through my website and other stuff is that when you ask people what you want, it can be so overwhelming. And it creates a lot of stress and anxiety because they don't even really know. So one of the things that we did in the book, it was actually my editor's idea, was set micro intents. So let me just think of something today that will make me happy. Forget about like the big thing and my life purpose and what my intents are, but what's one thing, what am I seeking for today? Like maybe it's just connection. Maybe it's a moment of quiet and inspiration. So setting a daily intent, a micro intent. And then when you set that intent, and I didn't talk about this earlier, but like for me, the way I see intent is that it's like a seed. And so we plant a seed in the ground and then we put the dirt on it, we water it, the sun nurtures it. We don't know the beautiful tree or flower that it's going to blossom into. But we trust that by nurturing in it, it's going to blossom into something. And so that's like an intent. It's not saying, oh, this is specifically what I want, but it's saying, this is the quality that I want in my life. And let me plant that. Let me put it deep down inside and then incubate and give it time to trust that it will manifest itself, sometimes in the way we could have never guessed. But once we plant that intention inside, we start to notice ways that it's manifesting in our life.
And it's also never too late to start something. Do you know? I mean, how many people have taken up painting? They took up cooking. They did things that they never thought they could do. And then one day they say, hey, you know what? I'm going to try this. I don't even know if I'm any good at it. And then they discover something about themselves that is so exciting to know that you are open to a new experience. So it's great to be imaginative. It's great to stay open. Anybody else have a question?
Well, it's more like a comment, Mallika. First of all, thank you so much. I feel like, first of all, I just finished the 21-day meditation.
Yeah.
With your dad, it was the first one that I ever did. And I did feel like at the end, it's like, okay, I'm supposed to know now, And so I feel like it's so beautiful that it's like we get permission to like do those little have a micro moment, and just, so I guess my question is, like we have our busy lives, we have our kids, we live on the west side, we do this, how do you combine connection with the universe and spirit, if you will, and like, I feel like I'm like, okay, I gotta be spiritual, and then it's like, okay, I gotta do my work. I don't know how, like, I get confused sometimes as to how to just embrace it all.
So, I think first the practice of just being silent, of just the meditation without having end goals. And that's the thing, we're such a goal-oriented society, which is why I kind of like intents. I always say intents come from the soul, goals come from the mind. So focus on the soulful yearnings. I'll just quickly tell a story, which I did as a TEDx talk, and I usually end in my big talks with it. But it kind of maybe addresses both of your questions a little bit. So for my book, I had this list of all these people I wanted to go talk to. And, I'm lucky I can reach out to people and go and talk to them. So I met, obviously went and talked to my dad, but met Dan Siegel, who I mentioned, Marianne Williamson, Andrew Weil, who I thought, discuss my sugar addiction, but he ended up talking about an owl in his neighborhood, so it's a whole different chapter. And I think that was part of the point, is like I'd go in with the specific goal that I wanted to like get from Andrew Weil, the sugar stuff, but then I got a message on trusting the universe. And so every time I didn't know what would happen. So Eckhart Tolle was on the top of the list as someone that I wanted to talk to. And I reached out to his office, and they were really sweet. They said, he never meets with people, but because he's a fan of your dad's, he'll meet with you. But like they gave me a date 10 months later. So I had like months to read and watch all his videos, and I went up to San Francisco to meet him. And so the morning of our meeting, I woke up at 4:30 to catch the early morning flight to San Francisco. And I woke up that morning like all stuffed up, sneezing, absolutely miserable. So sick, actually, that I thought that I should cancel the meeting because it would be really embarrassing to sneeze all over Eckhart Tolle. But then I was like, you know what, it took me 10 months to get this meeting. I stuffed myself with cold medicine and drank a lot of coffee and got on the plane. But when I'd woken up, there was a text message from my dad, and it said, "Good luck with the interview. Remember, he is always in the now." So I was like, what is my dad talking about? So I was like, okay, whatever. And I got on the plane, I landed, and another text message from my dad in the now with a smiley face. And I was like, my dad is my dad, like whatever. And so then I got to the hotel and I met Eckhart's assistant. And he said, thank you so much for coming. And I had like stuffed myself with cold medicine, so I was okay. And he said, Eckhart's really excited to meet with you, but I just want you to know that he only has 15 minutes. Now, I had prepared for 10 months. Like, I had questions, I had read everything, and like suddenly I started to panic, like, oh my God, 15 minutes, this is a total disaster. My editor is gonna be like furious. And I could feel all my sneezing coming back and like my eyes are watering. So I was like smiled and I said, oh, thank you, that's so sweet. But like my heart's beating and I'm panicked. Go up the elevator, my phone pings again, my dad's in the now. I was like, shut up, and I put the phone off. And I went to the hotel room, knocked on the door, and Eckhart opened the door. And I remember as soon as I saw him, I like had this I took a deep breath and I felt really calm. He reminded me of my grandfather. And so we sat down together and, I kind of put my phone next to me because I had 15 minutes. And I said, I'm doing this book on intent, and I explained everything, and so he listened, and that took 3 or 4 minutes, like our introduction, and I thought, okay, I'm looking at the time. And then he said, intent is the most powerful force in the universe. And so I sat forward, my notebook and pen ready to have the messages of the universe revealed to me, and then he stopped. And he just was smiling, and I was like, what's going on? And I'm looking at the time, and he said, do you hear those bells ringing? So I was like, what? And I could hear church bells ringing in the background. And so I was like, yeah, I hear those bells. And he said, those bells, they remind me of my childhood. And, I grew up in Germany, and I used to write in this church. And the bells are so beautiful, let's listen to the bells. So I was like, okay, yeah. So I'm looking at my clock, we're at 7-8 minutes, and he's sitting there and smiling and listening to bells. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is an utter disaster. And again, all my sneezing starting, my heart, my hands are sweaty, and it's 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, it was noon, and so the bells just wouldn't stop ringing. And so and I was getting so anxious that I'm not getting what I need to get done. And then I remembered the minute I finally was or the second that I was just you know what? I gotta let go. And I took a deep breath, and I was I'm just gonna listen to the bells of Eckhart Tolle. And I suddenly let go. I felt more peaceful. I felt more anchored. I felt present. I was in the now. And it was beautiful. And then the next thing I knew, there was a knock on the door. His assistant, my time was up, like literally not even one question. And so I put my hands together and I said, thank you so much. And then he said, no, sit down. And we spent an hour and a half then where he kind of talked to me about all kinds of things. But it was like in the letting go of all my task-oriented stuff and just being present. And then just to complete that, like at one point what I said to him was, I'm a soccer mom. I was like, I drive my kids around school all day, like I'm trying to get my errands done. I have this little company, but at the end of the day, that's what I do. And I grew up in a world where I was told, like, we all have our dharma, our unique purpose in life. How can I serve? And so I had all this pressure that I wasn't doing enough, that I was just a soccer mom. And he said to me, Mallika, never forget that it's the everyday people who are doing extraordinary things, the frequency holders, that are doing what they're meant to do, but they're doing it with a sense of purpose, with joy, with love. So be a soccer mom, but do it with love and do it with purpose, and then you will be living your intent. So that was kind of hopefully answering both.
That's amazing.
Thank
what
you.
An honor to hang out with him for an hour and a half.
I know, amazing. Totally unexpected, but once I let go, it happened.
I got it.
Anybody else have a question?
Thank you so much. I wonder if you could go through what the acronym is for intent again. I
Yes.
watched some of them and forgot the others.
So first of all, just for anyone who wants to write, use acronyms or steps. So, the 7 spiritual laws of success, the 4 agreements, intent as an acronym. So I is for incubate. And incubate is really, for me, honoring silence, taking time. That, for me, is meditation. For some people, it may be yoga, it may be dance, it may be walks on the beach. But it's really taking the time to not know, to let the unexpected play out. And you do that, I think, by being connected to spirit. N is for notice. So notice is really about a couple things, actually. One, I've talked incessantly about my sugar addiction, but I'm the person who's always on a new diet, cleanse, trying, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember doing this shift, instead of struggling with everything, why don't I just notice the messages that my body is sending me? When I eat certain things, I have more body pain. I don't feel great. And so I really started to notice the messages my body was sending me. But notice also the people, the places, and the circumstances that you find yourself in every day. And so, again, some unexpected person may be a key to a new discovery in your life. You may see a sign. It's the concept of synchronicity and synchrodestiny. So notice the meaningful coincidences that happen in your life. T is for trust. So trust is an interesting one because when you ask, who am I, what do I want? I mentioned before, for me, I want certain degrees, I want a certain job, I want a best-selling book, there are all these things that I want. But then if I ask myself deeper, what do I want? I want love, I want connection. I mean, this is the time in my life when I want to be with my girls. And so to really trust and honor that when you ask yourself, what do I want? That you're trusting your intuition and your answers. And that actually for me is a very hard one. And I had a lot of conversation with Eckhart Tolle on egoic versus non-egoic intents. What's coming from the ego versus from more of a soulful level. E is for express. So I believe very strongly that you have to say what you want. Create the ritual of writing it down, because when you do that, you actually encapsulate it. So my first book was called 100 Promises to My Baby. And it was 100 written promises, basically intentions about how I wanted to serve as a mother. And writing it down actually creates the ritual of, for me, planting the seed. Because it's actually you know what, I'm going to take ownership of this. And so you don't have to do it publicly, but write it down, and then maybe ritually burn it or do something with it. But write it down is the actual part of processing the seed, planting the seed. The next N is for nurture, nurturing relationships, reaffirming your intentions, coming back to them over and over again, asking for support. I think, again, as women, we often want to try all the time to do things by ourselves, but it's amazing when you start telling people what your intents are, everyone starts to come and want to support you, and you want to support others. And then the final T is take action. So take action, do stuff. It may not be momentous, huge life changes, but do small things that have big impact.
So you just mentioned about talking about your intents, right? There's a lot of people I hear say, I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm applying for this job, and I'm not going to tell anybody until it's completely done. They have this very sort of if I tell people about it, it's not going to happen. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, I think, first of all, let me
just repeat that, because so people that want to keep their intents to themselves for fear that if they say it out loud, it's not going to happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think for me, express is taking personal ownership. So it is, and I think the ritual of writing it down actually by itself is kind of taking an action step. And yes, I think there are certain things that you may not be ready to share with people out of maybe fear or judgment, or you're just not ready, to be honest. And so I think that comes with time. So when I had, when we launched intent.com, our website, what we found is that people were really nervous actually to share their intents, but they would happily support other people's intentions. So we actually have the support button, the like button, people were happily supporting one another, and that was creating a lot of energy. And it kind of took time for people to sometimes share. And so, but I think that I don't have a judgment, I really don't feel like you have to share. I think it's more taking the personal responsibility that this is something I want. Because what I've found is many people are too scared to admit what they really want. And so it's the personal acceptance.
I think also sometimes, for me, when I was writing my book, I very much wanted to hold it sacred to myself. It wasn't that I was not wanting to share it with my loved ones, and I knew I would get a tremendous amount of support, but just something that I felt was it was like my sacred space, and I wanted to honor that, and I allowed myself that. And when people asked me, they said, tell me about your book, and what's the title of that? I explained to them, I said, I'm not ready to talk about it just yet, but I will, but just not now. And what it felt like was it was my own sacred space for me that I needed to take. So sometimes we need to honor that.
So again, thank you so much. I mean, I'm just so moved by your authenticity and your
Thank you.
and groundedness, and all for you being here as well in your personal circumstances.
Thank you.
And I just want to add to, or ask something on the back of what's being discussed. When you're holding the sacredness of your own intention, how do you then balance that nuance of reaching out for support?
So I think you have to trust your intuition. So trust is a big part of that. And so you need to, for me, it is about nurturing relationships. So nurturing, and it's not many people, but 2 to 3 people in my world who I do have that trust with, which takes time and it takes effort. And, it's interesting just thinking about your question as well, is when we plant a seed, we can't keep suppressing the seed. We have to give the seed time to start to grow, but there is a point where it's ready to blossom, right? And so kind of giving the space to let things blossom. But I do think it's nurturing relationships. At the end of the day, we can't do everything by ourselves. we get more strength, and that's what I've seen. I'm a big believer actually in the power of social media, because I've seen that even from strangers, you can get empowerment. In fact, sometimes you get it more from people you don't know than from people that you do know. So that is also, but these are what all these meditation does. Meditation helps you get a better sense of intuition as well.
And I think there's also, for everybody, maybe it's different. Maybe you have your sacred council or your spiritual group. They're like your family, or it could be one person that you feel that you can bring them into that sacred space, and it feels trusting and it feels safe, and you don't feel that they're going to dissipate the energy or it's going to be distracting. For me, I find that I know those that I can really bring into the sacredness of self, and that they will really be able to hold the energy with me. Do you know?
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
First question is, what do you do if you have more than one thing you want to be intentional about?
I think we all have many things that we want to be intentional about.
What's your energy?
Yeah. I think it's, so one, you can have many intentions. But I think, again, first of all, there's the incubation phase and kind of letting, what's interesting about intention, sometimes it's more like you're listening than you're saying it at first. So that's why that incubation is really important. And then, it's like you plant many seeds. I do believe knowing what you're planting helps you then notice it and manifest it more. And so, it may be, from love and relationships to health and energy and vibrancy. We want all these things in our life. So it's totally fine. But you may, on different days, kind of set micro intents that are more linked to the larger intents,
And the second question I have, and thank you so much for coming, is what if you're in a space I've just kind of had some devastating news recently, and so I'm kind of in a space of mourning, and so there's a lot of darkness and a lot of heaviness and a lot of sadness, and it feels very contradictory to want to place intents about things that I'm bringing into my life and to blossom into my life when I'm in such a hard space.
I'll let Ora answer that, but I do feel like honor that. Take your time.
Yeah, I think honoring what we're feeling, the words that you're describing, whether it's feeling deep sadness or darkness or whatever that means for you, is to allow yourself to be in it. And I also feel that not to feel as though you have to make decisions when you are in an emotional, tender, vulnerable place. That those are not the times sometimes to make decisions or to make choices. Do you know? And that where I feel personally my focus and attention as of right now, because I am in a grieving state, and honoring that and allowing it to have the time that it needs, and for me to allow for that, and that I don't have to do anything. It's like in meditation, when I said just be, just let yourself be with what is right now. And that is the acceptance, and that is the non-judgment. And that is when we allow ourselves to really be with whatever we're experiencing in the now. Do you know? And that it has its place, it has its time, it has its movement, and then we allow for that. And then from that, we will decide what to do next, and what feels right, and what feels authentic to us. Do you know, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. I think when we just let ourselves just be with what we're experiencing, it will have a life of its own. Do you know?
You mentioned egoic and non-egoic intents.
So how do you differentiate between the two? It's very difficult sometimes to know what comes from spirit and what comes from the ego-based.
Well, for me, it's clear.
Let me just repeat the question,
yeah.
because I'm getting the cue from Ben over there that they need to be repeated. Egoic versus non-egoic intentions, correct? Is that what you were asking?
So for me, egoic intents, at this stage of my life are, I want a best-selling book, I want to be on the speaking circuit, I want to make a lot of money, all those kinds of things. But then when I really think about non-egoic, how can I serve in the right and best way for me right now? Which is coming from a place of love, which is going back to my conversation with Eckhart Tolle, which is being the soccer mom, being with my kids right now, honoring, the relationships in my life. And so for me, I'm constantly playing this balance of, what I want for like my work and, all the accolades and the degrees and all that versus family and relationships. And so, I'm kind of constantly going back and forth, but I think in my quiet times and my meditations, I can be really honest and authentic about those soulful desires. So again, the mind goals versus the soulful intents.
I also I want to add to that I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I mean, I feel that we have desires, and if we pretend that we don't, then we're not being authentic. But it's the balancing act of the things that seem egoic for result-oriented or material, if you will. And I think we have that. We are, as I think it was Gurdjieff who said, we're the lamb and the fox. We have the balance within us. And so how do we keep that balance going? I think sometimes there is a judgment about, I want those things, but I really shouldn't. So I'll pretend that I don't desire that. Do you know? And this whole notion of egoic versus non-egoic, we have egos, and sometimes they're healthy, and sometimes they let us know that it's very present within us, but we also need to know who's running the show. Is our ego running the show, or is it not? So I personally feel that we need the balance, and it's a delicate one. Okay, I think we can take we're going to take one more question, maybe two. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you both for having this space and for being so present for all of us. Such a beautiful experience. And I wanted to, I felt like I just needed to acknowledge your relevance right now in this time. I am actually a deacon's daughter, kind of spent most of my life being brought up in that upbringing. And barely at this point, similar age, stepping into, I've always been connected to spirit, but being able to stand in my own space and really speak for myself without allowing that influence, really kind of own it myself. So was there, I guess my question for you, was there a point where you were able to have standing in your space? Sounds like one of the moments was when you had that conversation with your father.
Yeah, it's a great question. So usually I get within the first 5 questions or 2 questions, what is it like being Deepak Chopra's daughter? So, I have one brother, and for my brother, we're 3.5 years apart. And so, we grew up. So first of all, I learned how to meditate when I was 9. And the first few years of our life, my dad was never present. He was very stressed out. He was miserable. He worked 24/7 as a doctor. And so actually for my brother and I, our memories of early childhood are we never wanted my dad around. When he was around my mom and he were fighting, etc. So we have a very clear memory of when my dad started to meditate and when our family life changed because of that. And so it was really a very personal, as children, dramatic shift. And when people ask me, how do we teach kids to meditate, I'm like, you meditate, as parents, because children are following your example, and that's what happened with us. But then, like I mentioned earlier, my dad's life was his life. In fact, my brother and I think we didn't rebel as such, but, we weren't really interested in it. We grew up in a time, especially in the TM organization, where my dad was very well known. There were all these assumptions about us. So, like, we'd be, in a hotel and we'd go get a Coke from, the vending machine, and people would see us and they'd be like, ooh, we're going to tell your dad. And we would be like, it is for our dad. It's like people have all these perceptions of things like that. And so, I'm very cognizant of the mythology of who a person is versus what they are. And that comes with me and my brother, the mythology of what we would be like as well. So that being said, I did MTV, I kind of did all my stuff, business school, etc. And I'll quickly tell this because I know we're short on time, but I was 5 months pregnant, and the phone rang, and it was my dad on the other end of the line, and he was sobbing one morning. And he was crying hysterically. My husband had answered the phone, and he handed it to me, and I couldn't even understand what my dad was saying, and he said, put the TV on. And it was the morning of 9/11, and the first plane had crashed into the first building, and while I was on the phone with my dad, the second plane crashed into the building, and my dad was hysterical not only because of what was happening, but he thought my brother was on the plane. So it took us about 2 hours to find my brother, and it was just a very, obviously, for everyone has their story that morning, traumatic experience. But I ended up going for a walk the next day, fainting and being in the hospital. And they were monitoring my baby just to make sure, but it was stress. And I remember lying in a hospital room, hearing my baby's heartbeat. And for the first time in my life, really feeling like fear and uncertainty and thinking, I'm bringing this innocent soul into a world that's full of hatred and fear and, uncertainty. And so for me, like for many people who had the death or the divorce or the diagnosis, for me, it was actually that becoming a mother in that time that really made me ask deeply, who am I? Really, who am I? And how can I serve myself and my kids on this journey? And so it was actually in becoming a mother that I took more ownership of my voice. And what I feel, one of the things that I feel good about of how my personal career has evolved is that I'm like a mom, and I'm the feminine voice. Like when I go and talk to my dad about balance, he's like, what the hell are you talking about? But it's because, and Marianne Williamson said this to me. She said, your dad could go out and be all over the world because your mom was at home taking care of you and your brother. And Marianne told me, she told me this when I had just become a mother. She said, I couldn't leave, Marianne said, I was a single mom. And for the first 5 years of my life, I committed that I will not leave my daughter for more than one night. So my career took a different path because as a woman and as a mom, I had to do that. Your dad could do what he wanted because he had your mom. And so I think for me, it's really finding the feminine voice in this, which is different as well. So thank you.
And I just want to add to that, you both are talking about being the daughters of someone. And in the daughters of someone is the someone that is you.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful.
All right, so we're going to end it on that, and Mallika's going to guide us in a ending meditation.
Great. Thank you. So, sit comfortably. And I'll first just explain what we'll do in this meditation, because we'll do something different. We're just going to use the words I am as kind of our mantra. So for those of you who are not familiar with mantra, it's basically a sound or a vibration. Man stands for mind, and Tra is the root for instrument, trident. So a mantra is basically an instrument of the mind. And so in different meditation techniques, we have different mantras or sounds, vibrational energies that just help ground us. So many of you must be familiar with Om, if you have TM or primordial sound meditation, there are different sounds which we call vibrational energy. We call them primordial sounds. So think of the sound of the ocean on the waves, or the breeze that blows through trees. There are healing sounds in the environment. And mantras are really representations of healing sounds. So I am is similar vibrationally to Om, but think of Om. So we're going from the infinite to the finite. Om. I am. Amma. Mama. Amen. Abraham. We see these sounds, vibrational sounds, throughout all cultures and traditions. So I find in this kind of audience, I am is a similar type of sound that's easy to use. So what we'll do is, and I'll explain it first, we'll close our eyes, and I'm going to just ask you to mentally repeat the words I am. So you'll say, I am, I am, I am. You'll say it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and then your mind's going to wander. So you'll start thinking, I have to go to the bathroom, what I'm going to have for dinner, this is taking too long, etc. And that is totally normal and natural and what your mind wants to do. So when it wanders, and you notice that it's wandered, I just want you to go back to I am. I am. So it'll be a natural flow between the words I am and then all your racing thoughts. Or it may be your body, I gotta move, etc. And if you need to move, just adjust your position, because if you're uncomfortable, you're going to be distracted. So all we do is we just prefer the words I am. So I'm not going to do a guided meditation. We're going to sit, we're going to close our eyes, and I'm going to have you just repeat I am. Your mind will wander, you'll come back to I am. We'll do it for about 2 to 3 minutes. I'll kind of get a sense of everyone's kind of restlessness. We'll do it for 2 to 3 minutes, and then what I'm going to do is have you keep your eyes closed, stop repeating the words, and what I do is I'll ask you a few questions, and when I ask the questions, just quietly, internally, experience the answers. So don't feel like you have to immediately intellectually answer these questions, just experience what comes up. This is how we start to listen to our intents, okay? So I'll ask 3, 4 questions. We'll just kind of experience the answers, and then we'll open our eyes, okay? All right, so sit comfortably. The first and most important thing is to sit comfortably, and if you have to adjust your position while we're meditating, go ahead and adjust your position. And close your eyes. And I want you to, let's begin by just taking a deep breath in and out. And another breath in and out. Now I want you to mentally repeat the words just in your head. I am. I am. And as you repeat the words, don't worry about a particular rhythm or pattern. Just let your breath be normal and do what it wants to do. And just repeat the words, I am. When your attention drifts away from the words, which it will and is completely natural, just prefer the words, I am. So we'll just sit quietly for about 2 minutes. I am. I am. Now keep your eyes closed, and you can stop repeating the words I am. And with your eyes closed, let's just take a deep breath in and out. Now with your eyes closed, I want you to listen to the questions I'm asking. Don't feel the need to intellectually immediately answer the questions, rather experience the answers. Who am I? Who am I? What do I want? What do I want? How can I serve? How can I serve? Now, with your eyes closed, shift your attention to your heart, and let's just spend a few moments to think about, what am I grateful for today? What am I grateful for today? And now, taking another breath in and out, just let go of any sensations, images, feelings, thoughts that may have arisen. And breathe in and out. And whenever you are ready, you can gently open your eyes. So as people open their eyes, I'll just repeat the phrase, you are what your deepest desire is. As is your desire, so is your intent. As is your intent, so is your will. As is your will, so is your deed. As is your deed, so is your destiny. So it really begins with asking those basic questions.
Thank you all for coming here tonight. Thank you, Mallika.
Thank you. Thank you.